Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, we can.
All right, okay, so shall we start now? How many students are there in the
There are
online?
50.
Or I
50.
think 54 now. Okay, then. So let's start. All right, last week we were discussing about sensation and perception. I hope to finish it today so that we can actually proceed with the new topic. No? Uh, As I mentioned to you last week, there was a difference between sensation and perception, right? So to recap, sensation is the process of picking up stimuli coming from the environment. No, it stops in the brain. No interpretation, nothing at all. It's just purely like that. No. Um, as I mentioned also last week, all the stimuli must be converted into electrical impulses. That is the only language that's actually understood by the nerves. The nerves cannot understand anything other than uh, the electrical impulses that will be transmitted from or in between neurons. Neurons are connected, you see, particularly in the brain, especially when they fire up and in receiving signals. The connections, otherwise known as connectomes, no? In neurology, is connectomes. These are the connections, physical connections and electrical connections that connect two neurons together. And of course, our brains are made up of trillions of neurons that, of course, are dying every day. That's the reason why, as you grow old, you tend to be forgetful. Anyway, that is sensation. It stops in the brain. No interpretation, nothing at all. No, it only receives electrical signal. Now, on the other hand, we also understand last week that perception is the process of interpretation. Means it perception, perceiving, interpreting. So interpret the stimuli that you receive. So the origin is in the brain. Which part of the brain? This is the part where you store information. We store all the experiences, particularly in the cerebrum. Of course, cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. All the experiences that you have in the past, you were in when you were kids, when you were children, when you were getting of age, no, let's say 9, 10 years, no, as far as you could actually remember, all the experiences that you could have in the past could otherwise be utilized this time to interpret the signals that are coming from the outside, no, that are signals that are transmitted by the neurons. So it will be interpreted in the brain and it goes back to the original site. That's how we sense and that's how we perceive. And of course, there are so many principles that we could understand, no? In the process of sensation and perception. By the way, let's try to continue. One of that principle is what we call as depth perception. How depth our perception will be, no? That perception originated from binocular disparity. A disparity, the brain is used in a little degree of differences in interpreting data received from each eye to perceive the depth. Okay, somebody wants to get muted. All right. So this is actually coming from the eyes, right? So the brain is used in little degree of differences in interpreting data. So we use the things that we have in the past to interpret the data that are received from each eye to perceive the depth. No? All right. So another one, of course, is that the motion parallax. Everybody encounters this in the past. No? This is the difference in the relative motion of retinal images that happen when we change position. So just like in the theory of relativity, the speed is not changing, but yet it looks like or it appears like it's changing. No, also the objects that appear closer seem to move faster. That is the meaning of that. Let's say, for instance, in the theory of relativity, the speed of light is not changing. It's constant. It's at the speed of 186,000 miles. But if the thing that comes closer, let's say you are actually looking at a car very far away, right? Very far away. So you are standing at the middle of the highway. when you look at the car, it looks like the car is moving slowly, right? But as they come, let's say the car is traveling at the speed of 120 kilometers per hour, as the car comes to you at a constant speed, the car seems to be speeding very fast, faster than 120. That is the meaning of the motion parallax, no? So this is where you perceive the motion of the moving car going towards you as if the car is speeding faster. But in reality, the car did not change any speed at all from the time you had first seen it very far away. That is the meaning of the motion parallax. Now, another one, of course, is interposition. This is when object particularly obstructs the sight of another object, producing the perception that the second object is farther than the first. So I'll give you so many examples later on. No, looking into the following. No, linear perspective. This is the apparent merging of two parallel lines at a distance. If you're going to stand, for instance, at the middle of a railway, let's say train, no? When you're going to look at the middle of the railway, and apparently, when there seems to be no obstruction, it looks like the two lines of the railway met in the end, no? But apparently, in reality, they do not meet, no? That is the meaning of linear perspective, as if they intersect at one point as they move far away. That's how we are actually tricking our brain. Relative size is another perspective here. Now, when we are going to look at the relative size, this is the relationship between the size of an object projected on the retina and the distance of the object from the observer. The bigger the retinal image, the closer the object appears. This is how we see things. You see, it depends on the images that's actually appearing far or near us. When you're going to look at an object that's very far away, it looks like it's very small because it enters the retina as if it's very small. But in reality, the size remains the same. As I mentioned to you earlier, that I think that was last week. If you are going to stand in the middle of the highway looking for another person, you see, the size of that person does not change. Okay? But as that person comes closer, that person appears to be big. That is the meaning of relative size. So therefore, in relative size, we are going to look or contextualize into the distance between that object and the retina. You understand that for the fact that in physics, it's the same, no? So the images that are actually emanating or that are produced using light waves may actually be magnified in the eyes. Of course, the object may not enter the eye, but it will actually enter the eye through the light wave that will be picked up, no, by your optic nerves. But of course, in reality, that size of an object will be reduced in such a way that it can actually be picked up by the eye. The closer the object is, the larger it will be. But in reality, there is no change, as I mentioned earlier, of the size of that object. Another very important aspect in depth perception is texture gradient. Now, what is the meaning of this? The nearer an object is to you, the more texture you can see. As the object gets passed further, the object appears smoother. That's the reason why we emphasized this last week when I started the Gestalt psychology. The more you're going to focus on an object, the more flow you are going to actually see. Just like right now, if you're going to look at your wall, very far away from your wall, when you're going to look at your wall, it's immaculate white. It looks like there is no distortion. There is no dirt. Because you're very far away. The only thing that you see is the total appearance, the whole appearance of it, right? But if you go closer, maybe 1 inch away from the wall, you will be able to see the flows. You will be able to see the dirts. you will be able to see the imperfection. That is the meaning. Another very basic example that I gave you last week was the car. No, you bought a new car, and of course, cars could be dented any time by small stones that are thrown to our car when we speed in a highway. If we're going to look at our car very, very far, texture gradient in the context of texture gradient, no, it looks like the car is immaculate. The car is perfect. The car is without dent. Yeah, because you're very far away. But if you're actually going to come closer, that will be the time that you will be able to discover that there are dents, there are imperfection, there are lines. The car is not perfectly painted. That is the meaning of texture gradient. No? The nearer you are on an object, the more texture you can actually see. Before you could actually see that it could be very smooth, but when you're going to look and see the object, it's not smooth. That is the meaning of texture gradient. That's how our eyes are perceiving things. That's how we perceive things. That's the reason why it's very important in psychology to understand and study sensation and perception, because we have to look into how our brain will perceive things around us. The way we perceive things can actually give or contextualize the people that we met, the things that we judge, the people that we judge, the patient that we interact with, our family members, you see? So we're going to look into that, no? Here is the perceptual process that we know of. How do we perceive? The process of the perceptual process is the process of perception. How do we perceive things? Now, of course, it starts with the sensory screening process. It will allow one to sort out and mentally process only certain details in one's surroundings. When we are going to look into our surrounding, we initiate already what we call as sensory screening process, right? It will allow us to sort out and mentally process only certain details in one environment. We cannot see everything that we want to see. You see? We cannot see everything that we need to see. We cannot hear anything that we or everything that we would like to hear. We only pick up things that we are interested in. We can only pick up things that our brain is interested in. We only sense things and perceive things based on our memory or based on our experiential connection with the things that we would like to see. You see? If you are actually going to reverse this, my goodness, you are going to get tired. Your brain will be very confused because the brain will actually be so super. It picks up everything, including the tiny little creatures that would actually be in our surrounding. There are so many. Imagine if you're going to do that. You could see almost everything. You could always perceive almost everything. And that's not good. So there will be a limit of what we could actually perceive. That is the meaning of a sensory screening process. Our brain will screen out the things that we would like to see. I'll give you an example. When you are looking for an object, the first thing that will register in your mind will be what kind of object you're looking for. It describes the thing that you look for, the texture and everything. So it will be there. So that in your brain, it will actually be narrowed down in such a way that when you're going to search, it will only look for that particular thing that is registered in the brain. So that's actually the meaning of sensory screening process. We cannot detect everything that we want to detect. We can only detect things that our brain would like to process. Each of us is constantly bombarded by environmental stimuli, so many, millions and millions every day, all competing for our attention, but eventually only one or two or three will catch our attention. Take note of that. Like in the classroom, there is a classroom of 60 students. You see? Like for instance, when Dr. Arnel will ask question, and everybody opens their mouth. I want to answer. what do you think will happen? There will be a noise in the class. Everybody competes to get my attention. And I do not know what to pick. I have to narrow it down to the person that I would like to pick. That is the meaning of perceptual process, no? Every day you're going to be bombarded by so many environmental stimulus coming from sound, coming from light sources, so many sources, all competing to get your attention. So your sensory screening process will narrow that down. This stimuli may be verbal or written messages. There are so many noises, lights, including at home. Right now, you are going to observe what's going on in your environment. You see, sometimes you complain, it's very difficult to concentrate because there are so many stimuli that are emanating from my environment. Maybe your house is very noisy because there are so many people there. Maybe the aircon is not working and it's very hot. This environment. Maybe the television is on and it creates some problems. Maybe the stereo is on and creates some problem. Maybe in your surrounding area there are cars that are actually very noisy. All are competing to your attention. You see? Now, we would literally go mad if we didn't have some mental faculty for sorting out and screening these competing stimuli. Imagine you're going to hear every day like that. It may not be sound, it may not be music to your ears. It will be crazy. Maybe you will become delusional eventually, and you'll become deluded and you will hallucinate in the end. That is the meaning, no? And you will get crazy because there are exactly so many things that you would like to perceive. But the only thing that you can handle, that your brain can handle, is too little of those stimuli that are coming from the environment. One too many. There are so many things that your brain can actually pick. And that's very dangerous, no? If there is no sensory screening process. So we have to be very careful about this. We have to look at that, no? That's how our brain works. It will narrow down things. It's impossible for us to know everything. It's impossible for us to perceive everything. That's the reason why I keep on saying in my psychology class, you know your limits. You should know your limits. You should know your capacity. You should know the things that you cannot do because you cannot do everything that you want to do. Is it? You narrow it down, just like what our perceptual process is. Our brain narrows it down because our brain will actually be bombarded with so many things. Our brain is like computer, you see? It depends on our experiences that we have in the past. Now let's say your computer. If you're familiar with, are you familiar with RAM? Anybody can tell me what is the meaning of RAM? Everybody has computer, right? Let's try to review your computer, no? Lesson. What is RAM in computer? When you buy a computer, you look for this, isn't it? No one?
Can I answer?
Yes, sure.
Random access memory.
Very good. Random access memory, just like our brain. And what is the emphasis on this? Random access memory. What sizes do we look for? And what is the importance of this in your computer? Right now, what is the size of your RAM in your computer? Tell me. You're Aya, right? Who is this?
Money.
Oh, yeah, okay. Right now, you are using computer, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me what is the RAM of your computer? Amani? You don't know? You should know, no? All you have to do, I'll teach you how to check the RAM, no? You go to the control panel and you go to the system and click the system, you will see your system information, including the RAM. Yeah? Now, this is actually very important because RAM is included in the things that we are actually going to buy. If we buy a computer, we look into RAM, isn't it? Random access memory. What's the meaning of this? This is a temporary memory that is used to process the computer. The main and ultimate processor will be your processor. Maybe you could actually have Core i7, no? But the brain, your computer, your temporary brain, the RAM. No? Others would actually have, for Atom computers, the small computer, we have 1 GB. A little bit higher, 2 GB. For faster computer, at least 4 minimum, no? Just like what we are using right now. But I'm not happy with 4. So I may go with 8. Maybe I'll not be very happy with 8 because I do gaming, no? Maybe I go 16. But 16 may not be so fast. I go with 32. Others would go to 64. Right now we have 1 to 8. These are the two little things that are placed in your computer that processes information temporarily. When you turn off your computer, all the information there will be reset. You see? So that's actually like our brain. You see? The more, I'm going to give you an example now. If you open up so many things in your computer, while attending your lecture today, there is a Facebook that is open, there is a Microsoft Word that's open, there is a game that's open, there is video that's open. Eventually, the RAM will be filled up, especially when you're actually going to have only 2 GB or 1 GB. You see? It will be filled up temporarily until such time that it will not be processed anymore. So the processing of information will become very slow. When you're going to type using your Microsoft Word processor, may be very, very slow because your RAM is already filled up. What do? You have to close everything or you are going to reset your computer. How do you reset? Turn it off and restart. Now imagine if your brain is just like that. There are so many information that are actually coming in at the same time. The interpretation of the stimuli will be very slow. If not slow, your brain will break down because your brain can handle only so much. That is actually the meaning of perceptual process. We are going to handle, your brain will handle, that's the reason why it screens what your brain would like to perceive. You know, the process of interpretation is actually coming from the brain. It's called perception. Look at this. You are bombarded with so many information, but this is how your brain works in screening. Your brain will only interpret the thing that it picks up to be very important to you. A couple, maybe, or maybe 1, 2, or 3, or 4. You see, that will be picked up. That's the reason why when you're going to look at your in front of you right now, there are so many images, so many letters, so many decorations. But the brain cannot actually immediately interpret all those things around you. It can always pick up small figures. Maybe it will pick up light, it will pick up television, maybe it will pick up pictures only. But not all the things that you see will be perceived immediately because the brain will process, the brain will screen what it wants to interpret. That is actually the meaning of what I'm discussing today. That is the meaning of perceptual process, right? It picks up things that it really would like to perceive, that it really would like to interpret. No? That's the meaning of sensory screening process. That's the meaning of perceptual process. Because if we're not going to do that, the tendency is that we would actually be mad. See? That is the meaning. Your computer will break down if that is the case. You know? You know what happens when the computer breaks down? There will be a blue screen. I believe some of you actually have experienced this when there was a blue screen, isn't it? Did you encounter a breakdown of your computer? Then it says error, then blue screen. No? Then your computer attempts to repair it. That's actually what it goes. See? If you are not going to install properly some of the programs, your computer will break down. See? Your brain also will break down. That is actually the meaning. So let us try to look on the figures that we would actually see on the board. You see? Or on the screen. What do you see? These are very big example of the figures that we would like to see, right? There are several images that will actually tell us something. So like for instance, here, this is closure. See? Here we see circle, we see X, few dots, but X. Our brain is actually closing it already. You see? Our brain interprets that to be an X, but if we're going to narrow it down, it's not an X. It's a connected line that is not supposed to be written as an X. That is actually the meaning of this, no? Okay. So now let's try to move forward in understanding our perceptual process. We have what we call as absolute threshold of activation. This is how we can actually pick up minimum stimuli so that our brain can actually interpret it. Yeah? That is the absolute threshold. How faint would the sound would be before you could hear it? How faint would the light would be before you could actually see? Just like when you're going to enter the room, dark, no light. Before you could actually see anything in the room, how much is the minimum amount of light that will be needed so that you can see in the room? You see? For music, how much minimum sound would actually be emanating from an object before you could actually hear that object? That is the meaning of absolute threshold of activation. You see? This is actually, if you're going to look at our definition here, I'm going to read for you. It is believed that all sense organs have absolute threshold of activation, yes. Thus, many stimuli go unnoticed. This is the meaning of this. Without reaching the absolute threshold of activation, you could not perceive it. Okay? It is as if that object is invisible. It will be unnoticed by individual because they are not strong, very faint, that it could not be detected, very bright or loud enough to activate our senses. As I told you earlier, the only thing that you require to see objects in the dark room is a flicker of light, maybe one light, that will activate your nerve endings in the optic nerves that can pick up the image in the room that is very dark. Let's say you're traveling, you say you're staying on one area, for instance. All of a sudden, there is a faint noise emanating, coming from the car, emanating from an object away from you. Maybe a music that you love. You see? Isn't it? A faint music could actually be enough to activate your auditory nerves. But in a way, right now, around you, there are so many choices of sounds that are very faint that could not be heard by you. These sound objects have not reached the absolute threshold of activation. That is the reason why you could not hear it. You see? That's how our brain perceives things. Another one, number two, okay, how we perceive things, the perceptual process, sensory adaptation. Going back to my example, in a dark room, the only thing that is required from you is a faint of light before you could actually see an object. Now, imagine this. I believe everybody experienced this already. You come from a place where there was a bright light. All of a sudden, you entered the room that has no light, that is very dark. The only thing, as I introduced to you earlier in absolute threshold of activation, the only requirement that you would be needing would be a faint flicker of light before you could see. But there was no flicker of light that you could actually see. That's the reason why it's very dark. You could not see things. The moment you are going to enter there, you require few seconds to stabilize what you could actually see, to stabilize your sense organ, to stabilize your eyes. And eventually, after a few seconds, your eyes adapts and your eyes will pick up any source of light, faint as they could be, but still a source of light. Therefore, your eyes can see in the dark place after a few seconds of staying there for a while from a very bright place before you enter the dark room. No? You get my point. All right? Sensory adaptation. This is a process by which individuals tune out certain objects or stimuli after continued exposure. Right? The ticking of the clock, it may appear to be very loud for a person who has focused attention. This is another one, no, another example. Yeah? If you're going to hear the sound of the clock that's actually ticking, it's very annoying. But in the end, it will not be. So the example that I gave you earlier was the opposite of the example that I'm giving you right now because there is a source. The first example that I gave you, there was no source. Now there is a source. Just like the other boys, boys love music so much that they would actually mount their car with very loud speakers, no? So for some, it is actually very loud when they play it. But eventually, as they are exposed to it, it will no longer be very loud music. It will be a very good music. Just like what you are actually hearing right now. When you're playing on your headphones, on your earphones, what could you actually hear? Music. Now, the amount of decibel that you could actually play would be dependent on the type of experience that you have. No? Other people would hear if the decibel is higher. It's enough for other people to hear if the decibel is just normal or a little bit lower. It's just like that. That's how our we call it sensory adaptation. And of course, when we perceive things, we are also affected by our personal influences. As I told you, interpretation and perception of things will be dependent on our personal experiences. That's the reason why I keep on telling you personal biases. This is it, no? This is coming from us, our personal experiences. So we go with number one, response salience. This is our tendency to focus on objects that relate to our immediate needs or want. That's why when we are hungry, we go for a desert, for instance. We are actually thirsty, we have not eaten for a while, or we have not drunk water for a while. The first thing that our brain would like to see would be food and water. It will narrow down to that. That is actually the main focus of what our brain will want. Will want to see, will want to perceive. Just like when you are cramming for your grade, for your assignments, the same way. What comes first? Deadline is the thing that will influence. This is the thing that I'm going to do first, so I'm going to do it. Your brain will actually focus on that. That is the meaning of this one. Response salience. This is the tendency to focus on an object that relate to our immediate needs or wants. Okay. Number two, response disposition. This is the tendency to recognize familiar objects more quickly than unfamiliar ones. Let's say when you go to the buy mall, chances are you only see people that you know. Sometimes you see people that you do not know, and of course you see seldom you see that people that you know. But the moment that you actually recognize them, you feel so excited because you narrow it down. You narrow down the choices that you may actually have. I see that person. That person is very familiar to me. Immediately, your brain interprets that that person is familiar to you. You should meet this person because this person is known to you. That's why when you meet someone that you know in the mall, you are so excited, as if you have not seen for a long time. It happens so many times to us, no? When you go to the mall, when you go to another mall, you see someone who is actually familiar, you tend to greet them. In reality, if you're just actually walking, you'll just see bunch of faces. But in response to this position, your brain narrows it down. It would like only to see things that are actually familiar. That's the reason why when you are buying things in the supermarket, you only look also for things that are familiar. We'll understand this when we tackle social psychology, you see, where brand plays a very important role in our choices. No, the more familiar we are with the brand, the more we buy them. Just like right now for hand phones. What are the very basic and most familiar hand phones that we know of? Can you tell me? Hand phones. What are the two most familiar hand phones that you are buying in the market today? Cell phones, hand phones. Hmm. Anyone? Use your imagination. When I speak of hand phone, what comes in your mind?
iPhone.
iPhone, very good. Yeah? Other than that, what else? The other one, more familiar one, most familiar one.
Android.
Android, Samsung, right? iPhone and Samsung, isn't it? Because
Yes.
you are bombarded every day with commercial. They're playing with your choices. They're playing with your pickup. They're playing with your response disposition. You are actually flooded with so many information about this, so that when you are going to buy the iPhone that you need, the phone that you need in the future, the only thing that you will pick up will a thing that's very familiar to you. You do not pick up anything other than the thing that is actually familiar to you. That is the meaning of this. You see, this plays a lot in our psychology. This plays a lot in our day-to-day activity. See, this play a lot in our lives. It will influence us in our decision-making process. Our brain influences us. Our pickup of choices influences us in everything. We do not want to see things because these are the only things that we can actually see. Our brain is allowed to pick up. Our brain is allowed to interpret. Our simple choices of food, our simple choices of color, our simple choices of car, our simple choices of buying for phone. You see, the first thing that comes in our mind would be iPhone, and we tend to buy iPhone. When we go to the market, the only thing that we look at into would be iPhones and nothing else. Other phones may be strange to you already. The brain may not pick it up because the moment that you choose for a phone, you want iPhone, and the brain limits you to look for other things. That's the reason why you dislike other things. You like only iPhone. That is your response disposition. Your tendency to recognize familiar objects more quickly than unfamiliar ones. Okay? They play around in the market a lot. Another very important influences in depth perception or perceptual process would be attitudes and feelings toward an object or person. You see, our favoritism, no? The way people feel toward a particular object or person can also have a marked influence on how the object or person is perceived. See how we judge people, how we have established our attitude and feelings toward that particular person, let's say our friend. That's the reason why there are people whom you consider friends, and there are people whom you consider as not friends. If they are not friends, actually, the opposite of friends would be not friends, not enemies, okay? Enemies are too extremes, no? Not friends means to say they are not your friends. If they are going on the opposite, you do not just actually go to your circle, so they are not your enemies. You see? If you're going to describe your friend, you're not friends as your enemies, as if you would like to kill them, no? Because they do not want to receive love, and you do not want to give love to them. So there are so many things that you are going to learn from this, you see, with how we decide things, how we choose people, how we choose people who are very important to us, how we would like to connect to people. In similar way, if you maintain Facebook or any social account, it plays very important role as regard to the attitude and feelings toward that particular person that we choose. See, we friend and unfriend people. We choose people all the time. The choosing of these people, the choice of these people would actually be dependent on the attitudes that we could actually derive, that we could have actually established beforehand on that particular object of person or people. You see, that's how we should actually influence our perceptual process. See, I would like to go to you. Let's say somebody come to ask you that you do not know. Oh, can I buy you a dinner? Sometimes at the back of your mind you say, who are you to buy me a dinner? You are not my friend. You see? But if a friend very familiar to you comes to you, I would like to buy you a dinner. I would like to buy you a tea or coffee. Of course, you know them already, and you are friends with them already. The only thing that your brain will actually say, go. They're your friends. Accept the invitation. That is actually the meaning of these personal influences that we have. There is past salience, there is past disposition, attitudes and feelings toward an object or a person. Okay? There are also some barriers that are actually playing very important role in our perceptual process in order to have very accurate perception on others. As I mentioned to you, biases, no? Before, these are our personal biases. One of those things would actually be coming from stereotyping. Everybody knows, I believe, the word stereotype. The placing of description on that particular group of people. You see? That's how we can simply define stereotyping. This is the tendency of every person to assign attributes to people solely on the basis of their class or category. Like, for instance, we're very judgmental. I'm also a very judgmental person once in a while, but already I have overcome those biases already. Very judgmental sometimes. People are judgmental. I cannot blame you for that because you are just human beings. You are just actually trying to learn things. No? Be judgmental spiritually is bad. But being judgmental as a human being is acceptable in a way. You know why? Because we are trying to learn. No one is born perfect. We are actually trying to learn from our mistakes. We are trying to learn from our biases. We judge people, whether we like it or not. You see? I'm going to tell you honestly, no? We judge people all the time. If you see someone who appears to be very poor coming to you and approaching you, the first thing that will come into your mind will be, is this person trustworthy? Will this person hurt me? Will this person ask money from me? You see? Because we stereotype. They are the stereotype of beggars. The moment we see people who are not actually dressed well, who are dressed awful, and sometimes their smell is bad, we have a tendency to brand. This is the right term, no? That we could actually, this person is bad because that person is poor. That person is bad because he is a son or a daughter of criminal. That person is bad because his father is a drug addict. That person is bad because he is from this country. That person is bad because he belongs to this tribe. That person is not trustworthy because he comes from this place. You see? We try to stereotype them. We try to brand them accordingly. And our brain will actually be tricked to choose or to decide based on the process of stereotyping that we could actually have. You see, branding them. This is actually very bad. This is not actually good, no? But it comes into play when we perceive things, right? Another one, halo effect, as if everything that we saw, that everything that we see in that particular person is perfect. Angel, no? Our tendency to allow the traits exhibited by people to influence our impressions of the other traits. Oh, like for instance, I can trust that person because I dealt with him before. I can trust that person because he belongs to a good family. I can trust that person because he comes from this country. You see, as if you're actually judging them, as if that person that you are judging is perfect, that they cannot commit mistake. This is actually the problem that we have in the process of accurate perception. You see, we are misguided in a way. But what to do? This is our part. This is the life that we have. This is included in our judgment. This is actually how our psychology plays in decision-making process. And of course, number three, implicit personality theory. This is our tendency to have a priori picture. A priori means your knowledge before, or what other people are like, that colors, how we see them. A priori means you have already judged them, just like in halo effects. But in halo effect, it a tendency to group people that they are good. In implicit personality, at the back of your mind, that person is bad already. You have already, you have already a judgment. You have already prejudged people accordingly. That is actually the meaning of this. A tendency to have an a priori picture of what other people are like. You see? That's how our perceptions are clouded. That's how our perceptions could also be limited. These are based on our personal biases. Any questions so far? Can you follow?
Yes, there's no question.
All right. We're moving forward. Selective perception is another barrier. This is a process by which we systematically screen or discredit information we do not wish to hear and focus instead of more salient information. Selective perceptions. This is the reason why sometimes people are very gullible, no? Simple, no? People are cheating other people because of one thing. They play around with the expectation of that person. They would like to see, they would like to say what people would hear. They would like to exhibit what people would like to see. This is actually the problem. We've already prejudged, no? Sometimes when we judge also, these are the things that I really would like to hear. Let's say, for instance, in the process of evaluating teachers are always telling, come on, really? Student must evaluate me very good. But there will be a point that you will be evaluated badly. You see? When the evaluation will actually tell, this teacher is not teaching, this teacher is not good. At the back of your mind, you are hurt because you are clueless on what people said to you. You are expecting them to see that you are best in everything. But to your dismay, people say otherwise. This is the meaning of it, no? In our selective perception, we would like to hear what we would like to hear. We would like to see what we would like to see. These are the things that cloud our judgment. These are the things that cloud our perception. We do not want to see things as if they are always, let's say, distraction of the things that we would like to hear. You see? We are very selective in a way. Just like we are selective with our friends, we are selective also with what our brain will actually perceive. You see? The music that we would like to hear is another very, very example of selective perception. There are music that you love, but there are music that are so annoying. You see? So the only thing that you can actually do is listen to the music that you love, but do not listen to the music that are annoying. Beautiful pictures. You do not want to see pictures that are not beautiful. You see only pictures that are beautiful. That's how your brain works. Another very important thing that we could actually look into the barrier will be projection. I will speak about projection when we tackle about personality later on. No. But projection in a way that will cloud our judgment will be our tendency to ascribe to others those negative characteristics or feelings that we have about ourselves. I'll give you an example. We are not perfect as human beings. There are weaknesses that we have. So what do? We project these weaknesses to other people. And we see these weaknesses from other people. We blame them. We scold them because we see weaknesses in them that we ourselves are weak at. You see? We do not want to acknowledge our weaknesses, but we see these weaknesses that we exhibit supposed to be the weaknesses of others. That is the meaning of projection. You know, just like in the movie house. In the movie house, we do not actually watch the movie by watching at the source of the projector. You see? If you're going to do that, you cannot see the movie, you cannot see the big picture. The only way to watch the movie is to look at the end of the projection. So the picture is projected on the screen. This is the meaning. We do not look at the source. This is how projection works here. We have to look. Our bad experiences, our bad description of ourselves, our bad habit would actually be seen to other people. That's the meaning. We'll discuss more about this when we tackle personality over there. That will be the next topic. Temporal extension. This is the tendency to distort or ignore information that is either personally threatening or culturally unacceptable. Sometimes we do not want to accept things as if they used to be, as if these people or these things will actually be a threat to our aspiration, to our aspirations. No, we do not want that. No, so we cast them aside. A tendency to distort or ignore information that is either personally threatening or culturally unacceptable. I'll give you an example. A friend comes to you telling you that your friend A is very bad because that friend A is such this and such this. What are you going to do? Ignore your other friends. What other friends are telling you about your friend A. You do not want to listen. You do not want to hear what they are supposed to tell you. You just simply say, ignore it, ignore them. Okay? Because you do not want to listen anymore. That is a distortion of the reality. That is the distortion of the information. No? Because you do not want to accept the information that's being fed to you by other friends. All right? Any questions so far? So for this chapter, we discussed the following. Sensation. You know this already. Sensation is actually coming from the environment. It stops in the brain. Perception is the interpretation of your stimuli from the brain going outward, right? So the chemical senses are the smell and taste. There are four basic tastes that are sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. Then perceptual organization occurs in different ways. We know this: closure, continuity, proximity, similarity, simplicity, common fate, perceptual constancy, illusions, and depth. Okay? That ends our sensation and perception discussion. I'm going to give you a break, and we're going to have our next topic by 9:40. Okay? Please come in at 9:40. You have 12 minutes break. Okay?